second ad hoc council committee on growth and development. Thank you, Vicki, for being here on short notice, standing in for Stacy, who is ill today. So our agenda, I want to take just a minute to recap sort of what's been going on the last week or so, clarify the meeting purpose, give you my sense of the agreements and where we are to date. And then most of the meeting is going to be about objectives for growth and development with discussion of the actions. Is what I think we're about. This meeting is scheduled to go for an hour and a half, so we should be done by 4:30. And there's another ad hoc committee coming in at 4:30, so we got to be done by then.
Until 5.
What?
We have till 5.
We have till 5?
Yes.
Lucky us. We have till 5 o'clock.
Ryan, I just want to give you a heads up that I may have a phone call that I may have to take. I don't normally, I try not to do that normally in meetings, but
okay.
I just want to give you a heads up.
Thank you for letting me.
If I don't take it, it's nothing personal.
That's coming. So as a reminder, we are in the latter stages of the strategic planning process, moving toward hopeful council adoption of the strategic plan this spring. And we are in the place where we're looking for to get council's comfort on we've already approved goals and objectives, and then we've been fleshing out actions. And we have a council work session next week. And because we knew there were a variety of opinions and questions about council's intent related to goals and related to objectives, we decided to have a series of ad hoc committees to review those. We have met with most of those committees now. I think the last one is later on this afternoon, so we've done 5 of the 6. And the first, we had one meeting of the Growth and Development Ad Hoc Committee about 10 days ago, and that was a lively discussion with it. We spent a lot of time talking about where we were with the council's intent on growth and development, and we spent some time recrafting objectives. But we didn't feel like we had it solved before that, and so we wanted to have another meeting to see if we could get to the place where we had agreement on the objectives, and that's what this meeting is, to inform the council work session next week. It looks like everybody's got a copy of this sheet, which says growth and development at the top and has a picture of the wall graphic that I did at that meeting last time. And I just want to sort of, this was the outcome of the last meeting. This was my interpretation of where we were at the end of the last meeting, not actually proposing where we were. That we agreed on the objective, or the goal was growth is proactively managed, planned, and communicated in a responsible way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. That was unchanged. My synthesis of your agreement about that is that growth and development is a top priority for Issaquah and this strategic plan because the community continues to grow and change at a significant pace. The city of Issaquah must regularly evaluate progress on existing plans, strategize how to have a bigger influence on growth and development, explore options, and continue to engage the community to stay abreast of people's feelings about growth. It seemed like there were 2 kind of objective concepts that we talked about. We did not agree on specific language, so these are just sort of my words as a placeholder at the end of that meeting. You can see in the picture at the bottom what was actually on the wall at the end of the meeting. Was take a more proactive role in managing growth, including implementing existing plans to ensure a variety of amenities, housing types, and services, and retain neighborhood charm, each with a distinctive character pattern and setting, both built and natural. And then we agreed to have another meeting to continue refinement of the objectives, actions, and performance measures ahead of the council session. So again, we're not going to try, hopefully that feels familiar to where we were at the end of that meeting. What we want to do today is we want to review where we are and then see if we can finish up with agreement on what the objectives are. And I know you'll want to talk about the actions in some detail to understand those, and you have a draft of some proposed stuff. I think, has that been handed out yet, David?
Yes.
So you have it, you haven't seen it, nobody saw it before today. We've been working to try and make that. Let me, before we dive into that, let me give you a sense of where we are. The other thing that happened is because we knew there was tension in this group and sort of we were trying to get clarity, David and I had a phone call with 2 of the 3 of the people in the room and with Stacy yesterday to try and clarify your individual sort of meanings, trying to get a sense of some of your what was must-haves and deal breakers and try and get that sense. And I want to give you a high-level summary of kind of where my sense of that at the end of the day yesterday. I think that you all agree, and Vicki, I'm sorry we didn't talk to you yesterday, so I've just got to proceed with the notes I've got. So you all refers to Stacy being part of that conversation. You all agree that growth and development is very important and must be addressed in the strategic plan. That was very clear. I think you all agree on the vision to protect Issaquah's hillsides and neighborhoods by focusing growth on the valley floor. That came up repeatedly in the meeting. All of you said that again in the meeting. There seems to be great agreement there. You all agree that we need to balance housing and jobs and ensure appropriate infrastructure keeps pace. And I think we spent a lot of time kind of running around those issues, but I didn't see any disagreement that we want to have both housing and jobs. They need to be balanced, and we need to have appropriate infrastructure keeping pace as those things increase. I think you also all agree that the Central Issaquah Plan's basic tenets are sound. This refers to the plan's overarching vision to develop a regional growth center on the valley floor in order to accommodate growth while protecting neighborhoods and hillsides. Basically what it says on the first paragraph of that plan is that's what we're trying to do here, and I didn't hear anybody disagreeing with that basic premise. Then you get into the details of what does that look like and how does that happen, and there's more tension. My sense of what has happened is since the Central Issaquah Plan was adopted in 2012 was different than the community expected. The city responded to that with a development moratorium until details could be adjusted in 8 key areas. This was successfully completed in 2018 and the moratorium was lifted. So that all happened and coming kind of right up into the strategic planning process. It was happening as we were getting into this process. So that's the context for this conversation. What I came out of with my impression of the phone calls yesterday was while none of you are calling for a comprehensive review of the Central Issaquah Plan, we do think you agree that a data-driven review of progress toward the Growth Management Act and Central Issaquah Plan's targets is appropriate. So we had a conversation with each of you about reviewing how are we doing on progress toward those targets was appropriate, and everyone acknowledged that in doing that review, that might indicate a need for adjustments to the job creation activities that are happening, to the infrastructure priorities of the city, and or to the land use capacity allowed for housing. So it seemed like those are the things that are the basic levers there, and that review might cause you to choose to try and make some adjustments. The other big thing that's meaningful to this work group is that the core infrastructure work group decided that it should move the objective that was living there about infrastructure to accommodate growth into this priority area. And so far, nobody has disagreed with that move. That there were 2 objectives under core infrastructure. One was about keeping up with existing infrastructure, and the other was about new infrastructure to accommodate growth. And we decided to move it over here. So here it is. This is now the Growth and Development Group. Now we have 3 objectives, where we had 2 last time. So from the first meeting and the individual conversations, we think you agree on 3 objectives. I think you do agree on these. One about protecting neighborhoods and hillsides, one about proactively managing growth, and one about investing in infrastructure. So, I would put out there that these objectives actually have a lot of agreement, and we'll see how the conversation goes as soon as I stop talking. The first one, neighborhoods retain their charm and distinctive character, pattern, and setting that includes both built and natural environments. Objective 2, new and deliberate measures are implemented to better manage development and its impacts toward Issaquah's established growth goals. And 3, infrastructure is planned and prepared for future growth, leveraging development and incorporating innovative, sustainable, and resilient design. So on the sheet that most of you are looking at, this sheet with the blue headings on it, hopefully what I just came out of my mouth is the same thing that's in the blue boxes there. And then there are a variety of actions proposed by the staff to support that. So the outcome we want out of this meeting in the next hour and a half is, do we agree on those objectives? And I know you'll want to talk about the actions as you understand those objectives, and I'm sure you'll have feedback for staff. David, does staff want to present this in any way, or do you just want council to react to what's on the page?
I guess it would be good to have a reaction to what you just said.
Okay.
And then also, one note is that as we get up to the objectives, there were some changes that were made and some additions. So
Okay, so what? Good point. So why don't we? Anybody want to weigh in on what I just said?
I have a question. On objective 2, it looks like that one has changed from the previous version through the work of this group.
Yes.
And I like that it's more, I interpret it as more about implementation, it's more action focused. I wonder though, better managed development and its impacts towards Issaquah's established growth goals. I don't understand really what's meant by impacts toward established growth goals.
So there have been various versions of this objective that have been out there, and one of the questions that seem to be lurking to me, kind of unspoken, as I think there was general consensus that that the city needs to be more assertive about managing growth. Everybody seemed to feel okay about that. But then the question is, what are we trying to accomplish by that? And there seemed to be a lurking question about whether or not the established growth goals in the Growth Management Act goals and the Central Issaquah Plan targets were appropriate. And in the conversations with each of the 3 folks the counselors we talked to yesterday, my sense is we didn't want to do a comprehensive review of the Central Issaquah Plan, but rather we wanted to check on how our progress is going toward that plan. So my proposed language in this was to say we are trying to proactively manage growth toward those goals that are already established, as opposed to question the goals.
I understand it a lot better now. I think I still think that the way it's written, it makes sense to me without that. It's like that last clause is after impacts, so it's like the impacts towards Issaquah's established growth goals, which I don't think is actually really what you mean. It's just the framework around which we have new and deliberate measures are implemented to better manage development. So I understand it a lot better now that you've explained it, but I also think the way it's written is pretty still confusing.
So you would just put a period after impacts?
Yeah, I would. And then, there's a conduct a review of progress towards growth targets as the first action. So I think it gets into the actions where we have the growth targets.
So I think that this language could potentially paper over still some significant differences as to what better managed development means, right? Somebody could say, great, I don't want any more houses or any more jobs, and this goal is for me. And someone else could say, I want to get to these targets as fast as I can. These goals are for me. And somebody else could say, well, I don't want any more houses, but I want a lot more jobs. So this goal is for me, right?
So I'm way open to any language.
I
was trying to say in there that the targets are the targets. They're there. We're not changing them. That's what I was trying to say. And so your point is well taken that somebody could think we should go fast or slow toward the target. But I was trying to say we are not changing the target. That's what I was trying to say.
That was the point.
Question for clarity. You just used the word targets, and it's in action number 1. The objective used the word goals. Both of those are somewhat loaded words. And when you say targets, I think a certain thing because we are given, that's language in our comprehensive plan, and we must plan for both housing and job. We have target numbers we're planning for. Did you refer to those, or you prefaced the comments about what we're specifically about? Actually, you mashed up two things. You said the central area, and then you specifically said the regional growth center, which is a subset of the central area. Or were you talking about the goals for that part of town?
So good.
One is citywide, one is narrower, and one is a capacity, and one is a set of numbers.
So great question. Let me explain my intent, and then I'll rely on you and the city staff to figure out what the language should be in the final thing. It seemed to me that you have your regional growth center thing that's part of the Regional Growth Management Act plan, and it has targets in it. And that you have a central Issaquah plan, and it has targets in it. And I was trying to say, we're agreeing that those are the targets, and we're managing toward those. And I was trying to use language that said that. And if I didn't say that in the appropriate terminology, I will defer to those with more information than I have. That was my intent.
Okay, so I'll step away from that. The semantics. Your assessment of their conversations, everything you've heard, is that. Well, actually, let me get back to it.
Toward the numbers, I think that was the intent. Toward the numbers that are already in those plans, and that first bullet item would be.
Oh, okay. You think that?
Yeah, I think so.
During the course of one of my conversations
That's what was
yesterday,
intended.
one of the counselor, I said, as we were talking, I said, I think I just heard you say, rather than a comprehensive review of the Central Issaquah Plan, review targets in the Central Issaquah Plan in light of developments since 2012. And I was told, write that down. And I did, and I read that I wrote down to the other two, and everybody said, I can live with that. So I was trying to phrase that in language. I was trying to carry that forward into this conversation.
No, in this setting, the word target. Okay. All right. So it is actual numbers, jobs and housing, jobs and housing as a population specifically. Okay. As opposed to here are the goals and the vision for
Yes.
the center.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, is there a better way, Trish, to articulate that so that's clear?
You just want the numbers.
so this is an interesting conversation. I'm sorry.
No, if you want just numbers, it would be targets. That's the right number. That's the right term.
All right. When is the review, and when are we going to get an update of those? When are we going to do that again? How many?
Growth targets, state
Yeah,
growth targets,
yeah.
2020.
2020? Next year? That's what I thought.
That's when it'll start.
Right. And when will we have that process? So when
It usually takes a while because it's sort of negotiated.
okay, right.
So
So 21 maybe?
maybe if we're lucky, yeah.
Okay. The targets. So I'm going to use the word targets because that's what we negotiate with the others in the county, and they come from OFM and all that. We have some now, and by the way, these are independent of the central area. These are for the city. Okay. There's two layers here. There is the region.
With each other.
No, well, I'm just okay. Well, you're the guy in the middle, so I'm looking at you. And it seems to me that if the topic is those numbers, and I'm not so sure I was there, my mind might have been on this other kind of plans for vision and what would happen in the central area during our conversations. But these, which are citywide, it seems to me from a strategic plan perspective, what would be, you want to be proactive on something, is before, Trish and others are sitting and negotiating with others within the county on what numbers we might get, we should figure out ahead of time what we think it ought to be, and then go to that with a plan. Now that's proactive.
So I want to plus one something on that. One of the concerns that I've had as I hear about 2050, goal 2050, I've had a concern. Our community has been very progressive in accommodating a lot of growth. And one of the things I like about Paul's comment is I continue to have a concern that if people outside our city just sort of re-baseline, right, and they say, Issaquah has this many people and Sammamish has this many people, and you add 50% to that, and here's the number that you get, right? I think it's important to understand how far we've come on the 2040 goals to inform our position as a city towards emerging 2050 goals.
Okay, and I'm just going to agree. I agree, except it's 31, and then it's actually our current goal is 2031. And you're mixing up with Vision 2040, 2050, which is something else entirely different.
But,
so not to...
You get the...
I agree. And I want to... But I think I need, for your benefit, I got to kind of close the loop because when we spoke yesterday, I was actually thinking about... So now I talked about GMA, citywide, these targets, population, jobs. Another layer we have within the central area, but specifically within the regional growth center, is capacity for jobs and housing. They're not added to our state goals. They're just capacity that we've built into that. And formulaically, part of our application to PSRC to become designated as a regional growth center, we had to show that we had this capacity there. And these were separate from our OFM goals. And those were the goals that I was talking about. I was talking about what this zoned and land use capacities that we put in this central area, specifically the regional growth center, which actually stand out quite a bit from the OFM numbers. And I think you have them right here. Do you have them in here?
They're in the one-pagers.
You on the one-pagers? So I'm sorry if that was not clear yesterday, but I understand. I think I didn't completely understand that until a couple years ago as well. Am I making sense to someone who I think understands? Okay. Am I making sense to you, Tola? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Okay, I see the 11s over here. Any question?
I guess just a clarifying question. So the goals that you're referring to are the goals that are in the Central Issaquah Plan itself, or they're the bigger regional?
Well, what I've been trying to tease out, I think there's two different things. In the verbiage of this, and I think the intent of the authors and what we have in front of us today, with the citywide OFM numbers that we get through the county. Okay, you should plan to have this population, therefore you're going to need these many housing units. Demonstrate to me that you've got that capacity in your zoning and land use. You should be preparing for this many jobs. This is the allocation you've got. Demonstrate to me that you do that. That's all part of our comprehensive plan review. And then completely separate from that is what we've done for the Regional Growth Center. And we've done zoning and land use and other things which are additive. They're on top of that. And they're quite extreme. And they show a lot of capacity. And they're very much in line with the region's vision for regional growth centers. Again, I can't tell you the numbers off the top of my head. So they're a separate set of numbers. And when I was talking, it was those numbers. It was that regional growth center. And this was a conversation I struck up, I'm not sure if it was a year or two ago, with some on staff. It's like, okay, and I think I had it with Sheldon, who's not here, because I was learning about these county growth centers, and that the transportation funding formula doesn't really, it may not be, I was starting to realize, oh my gosh, the county centers, which I don't know if you're not at that much of a disadvantage compared to being a regional growth center. If it's kind of that, maybe we can adjust our numbers, not lose advantage from a transportation funding perspective, and fine-tune what we've done. And that was a hypothetical, and we didn't get that. And so that was still, that you didn't, unfair to you, Brian, that was kind of conversation and thought. So that was my motivation, and I think that that's what I would want in objective number 2 still.
So at the moment, based on everything that you've said that was very articulate and demonstrates a lot of information, I would revise objective number 2 to say new and deliberate measures are implemented to better manage development and its impacts toward Issaquah's established growth targets. Or do you want to have the objective list all those specific things that you just listed?
No to your question. From an objective perspective, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if these are 2 different objectives or they can be captured in one. What I just articulated was what about specifically the Regional Growth Center and what its objectives, targets are, and what about citywide, because in a couple years we're going to have to renegotiate our next set of numbers citywide. And those
So
are
it
saying,
kind of
can we
feels-
get ahead of that?
It kind of feels to me like we say Issaquah's established growth targets, asterisk, and then there's a little box that says these are the established growth targets that are the various things that you're listing here and what they say. Does that make sense? I mean, it feels like you're asking for.
New and deliberate measures are implemented to better.
Are you saying that you think it is a review is warranted of the capacity for in the regional growth center area, and also a strategy for thinking about the growth targets for the city as a whole might be to evaluate what we think is the right number in advance of the new allocation? 2 things, 2 separate things.
Definitely on the latter.
Okay.
I'd rather have a conversation about the former.
Okay.
So one of the challenges is that the Central Issaquah Plan got revised to include the Regional Growth Center. Yeah, it did. I'm looking at it. And so it's now an entire chapter of it. So when we talk about, not necessarily cracking open the Central Issaquah Plan, if we want to talk about that Regional Growth Center, because I think I'm not sure the community has as much buy-in on the Regional Growth Center as it does on the overall idea of the Central Issaquah Plan, which is let's put growth in the valley where the services and transportation are, right? The Regional Growth Center, I would say, as somebody who was here when the city got that approved, nobody sold me on how it's helped our city thus far, right? I mean, so. But the problem is it's now cooked into the Central Issaquah Plan, so you can't talk about it without cracking open the Central Issaquah Plan.
Well, I think in our strategic plan, so I agree with part of that, which is that I don't think that the community necessarily, without understanding all the context around why we have a target for growth. I mean, I hear that a lot about why are we growing and why would we have these plans that include so much growth. And so I think the goals that are put in place for why we have those targets, it's not simply to accommodate more people. It's at least in part to ensure the community's high quality of life, treasure natural amenities, distinct neighborhoods, and character are retained, the things that are in the introduction to this part of the plan. So I think that focusing on why we want to manage development as our objective belongs in the strategic plan. I think we need to, that's my thought, is that we should frame it rather than just say we are managing towards a target. There's so much behind that target. I think for a strategic plan, we're managing to achieve this goal that we have, which has to do with accommodating the high quality of life, natural amenities, et cetera, that are in the Central Issaquah Plan.
So are you saying you want more justification for the goal's okay, but you want more justification for it?
I still don't know that if we just say new and deliberate measures are implemented to better manage development and its impacts towards Issaquah's established growth goals. I don't know that objective really, to me, speaks towards the main goal about proactively managing, communicating in a responsible way for a strong sense of community and livability, because it's just saying we are better managing development. That is, I think, vague. It could mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. And then as far as the impacts towards the established growth goals, I think there's a whole big context about why we have goals, but without getting into why we have targets. It's just saying we have targets and we want to manage towards those targets.
I think I know what you're saying, and I'm going to actually then extrapolate back to targets, because that's what I was trying to say. Let me see if I understand you. There is a quality of life. There is an Issaquah lived experience, environmental realities, families, community. Those are our goals, and you can describe that many different ways. And it's not a number of people or a number of jobs, right? And so I think that's what you're saying. And a little bit of context for me is the very kind of mechanics. If you're going to be a municipality in the state of Washington and do planning under growth management, the State Growth Management Act, you as the word was said, you negotiate within the county and with your neighbors on numbers. Now I'm back to numbers. Okay? And what the real alignment between these other ways of measuring what we have in these numbers isn't something that we've discussed. But we can look at the numbers we have for the 2031 goals and see are relative to those. Let's take housing, the number of housing units. And you can say, well, boy, we're way ahead of the curve on that, and we think it's impacting all of these other things. What I was thinking was, and Trish confirmed for me, we're actually going to get a chance to negotiate another set of numbers in this 5-year horizon. Actually, by the midpoint, we should be done. And going through an exercise that says, let me before I get there, back up a little bit. To participate in that, you take numbers, and you have to take numbers, but you're kind of in this community of other neighbors and neighboring cities all around us. It's like, hey, the county's going to get this much growth. Everybody tell us how you're going to support your fair share of that, your share of that. And so it's always in what is Sammamish doing, what's Redmond doing, what's Kirkland doing. At the higher level, it's all like, okay, we got to see it, that it's all kind of spread around. Everybody, we aggregate it all up, and you can account for everything that's going to come into the county. You've all got your marching orders. Go update your comprehensive plans. That you're supposed to do that. And so we're going to be in that game again. And we're going to be talking about, I don't know if it's going to be the 2041 goals or whatever that number is going to be, but we're going to get, in 5 years, we're going to go through that process again. And my thinking today, and Vicky's helped me a little bit, is and this is what I said earlier, I thought David captured it accurately as well, was, before we sit down at the table and negotiate with the other cities for this global goal, is go through a process of what did this community think those ought to be, driven by these things that are really important to us. And so we can go to that process that starts in 2020 and may take longer than finish with a lot more confidence that what will come out of that, these targets that we're going to be given and we have to accept, align with what we want as a community. Does that make sense, Trish?
So
I'm looking at you because I know you're
So the key question I have is, what is Issaquah's strategic objective? And I think that's what you're saying is and I agree with you. I mean, all this stuff about how regional growth is managed is context. The question is, what is Issaquah's objective? You're the city. You can say we want to go make those regional goals for Issaquah much higher because, by God, we want all the growth, or just the opposite of that. We really we want to make it as low as we can. And if you can do either of those, and I guess that's what you're trying to say is, what do we want it to be for Issaquah?
Right, and I think if you're sensing maybe a little bit more energy than previously, it's because I think it gives me a ready-made, and not that this is the only litmus test, but if someone were to ask, well, what did you accomplish? What are you going to accomplish after 5 years from now? I said, well, you know what? The whole region is growing, and we have to step up and take a certain share of it ourselves. And guess what? The share that we got is exactly what we already knew we thought was right for us. And so somebody else wasn't driving the bus, we drove the bus ourselves. That's the definition of proactive, in my mind.
Cool. So what do you think the strategic objective ought to be? I was trying to say, we've got the plans, we're just going to manage to them.
Well,
but that's not working for
it's
you.
both.
So what do you want it to
Well,
say?
and then the central area and the regional growth center within it, I think I still think we need something around there per what you just said, because there are certain things. For the city to be successful, the idea of growth happening in a certain area, so we get certain results there and in the surrounding neighborhoods, that's still valid. So what I'm talking, and because this length, and so I think those are, see, I tease those out as separate things. What I just, a few minutes ago, I think that's a goal, and then this making sure that we get what we envisioned with our sub-area plans, in particular, in terms of the quality of life and the type of infrastructure and the type of the mix, the numbers, the mixed use, the green necklace, and all these other things, so that what the built environment would look like and the kind of experience for families and employers that represents. Yeah, those are the active management.
Well, can I ask you a question? Is your idea that you want to have an objective that says that as the new negotiations on the growth management new targets come, we're ready and it fits into the capacity we've already designed into the system?
I haven't gone that far with that last part. And that might be it.
Okay.
I don't know. But I think the first part of what you said is accurate. And you know what, I know we wanted closure today, and that feels like something really, really new. But if you heard, and I thought your intro rephrased pretty well the conversation that I was part of. Was that yesterday? Right? And then you wrote it like this. The way you wrote this did prompt this other thing. But what Mary Lou just said, her feedback of what she thinks she's hearing me say, is in direct reaction to what you thought you heard. And to me, that all of a sudden becomes something that's very measurable and worthy, and it aligns with, it's not so much we got goals, let's make, in terms of numbers, let's make sure we're managing toward them. It's more of, we're going to have to grow. What do we think those numbers have to be? Let's decide what that is and take a set of numbers that's consistent with what we think Issaquah ought to be. So it's not so much managing toward the numbers we have, it's managing the numbers we're going to get. I still see a lot of furrowed brows, so I should probably shut up.
Isn't part of yours, though, you want to be at the table when we decide the numbers, the new numbers? You want us, it sounds like part of your strategic goal, objective, whatever it would be, is you want to be the one at the table with the first set of numbers and say, I'm from Issaquah and these are the numbers we want. Is that what I'm hearing?
At the simplest state, yes.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, Tricia, excuse me. As Tola knows, and those of us who are elected who've been in these kind of regional bodies, especially it happens at SCA quite a bit, we're discussing policy. well, you know, my counsel and I discussed all of this, and we're in agreement that it ought to be this way. Well, that's a very persuasive argument to get what you want. And I'm saying bringing that same kind of tactic for the benefit of Issaquah long-term to that process. Okay, I'll shut up.
So I hear to strongly advocate Issaquah, a position for Issaquah in regional growth goals.
I think what Paul said might actually fairly easily be accommodated in objective 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think potentially you could say new and deliberate measures are implemented to better manage development with respect to Issaquah's established and coming or upcoming or in development growth targets.
Makes sense to me.
Because it just says it's more than just the numbers that we have in the Central Issaquah Plan.
So, okay, so evolving in some fashion, targets. I guess I want, in the conversations yesterday, and channeling Stacy a little bit, who isn't here to channel herself, she was saying, housing's happening faster than we expected, and jobs aren't happening as fast as we expected, and we should, so I was saying, so you want to go faster on jobs, and you want to consider whether you need to go slower on housing or something, and we kicked that around, and that seemed in line with other conversations. That didn't seem like that was a unique perspective, and that's why I was trying to sort of boil down to what is it, and the big lurking question under that for me is, are we having a basic debate here about what we're trying to accomplish or not?
But I have to bifurcate what you're saying between what's in the Central Issaquah Plan and what we have done to manage within the Central Issaquah Plan, and how the Central Issaquah Plan relates to the overall larger goals that we have as a city. We just got done with a super painful moratorium whose purpose was to correct the thing that you said that Stacy talked about, right? Which is that we've seen housing growing faster than everything else. We just turned the dial on, and to me this is like a car, and you're trying to stay in your lane, and whoops, okay, we got to turn the steering wheel a little bit, get back in our lane, right? Maybe you have to jerk the wheel back because you're entirely on the shoulder, but that's like staying in your lane. The larger question is, are we going to Sheboygan or Albuquerque, right? Because we have this larger set of things that are coming, and the Central Issaquah Plan is just a facet of the overall commitments that we have regionally and to our neighbors.
I have to make an important correction. He channeled Stacy, and said, and I've heard this conversation quite a bit about where we are relative to our overall housing goals. Those are citywide, and we didn't do anything in the moratorium or its changes to really tweak that at all, or even adjust that. It was different things, but she's talking about the citywide goals.
Okay.
I know she.
But I'm still saying that.
Okay.
What was that, David?
And how it relates to Central Issaquah.
Explain
Can't
that.
hear you, David.
So if the Central Issaquah Plan is a plan for achieving the citywide goals for housing and jobs, there is a connection there, is correct. And so I think that is the question of, so you were just finished talking about kind of the future-looking piece, the next set of goals that the city would have. And
Yeah.
I think what we heard was there was a question about how we are achieving and the progress and feasibility of achieving our current goals, right? And that the relationship of that to Central Issaquah Plan.
Yeah, because we want to future, especially population goals, to be met within the central area.
Correct.
But still, the citywide goals that are being referred to are, well, they're citywide. And this is what I said to you guys yesterday. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm not sure yet we have a single dwelling unit in the regional growth center yet. And so where the citywide, we're ahead in the numbers on the housing. That does not describe what's happening in the regional growth center. And
So-
so that's why I don't want to conflate those too much. It's not like we're getting too much housing there, we've got it too fast. So citywide that we have.
Yeah, and I wasn't even
Okay,
saying
all right,
regional
wanna
growth
make sure.
center, I was just saying central Issaquah, yeah.
I feel like we're playing a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole here, because there's various targets and various things. My big question is, I mean, I've heard from the council that we want to be more assertive about managing growth. I've heard that, there seem to be everybody's kind of, and my question is, you have a variety of plans and goals and targets, and are you wanting to work harder to meet those, or are you suggesting that you want different? I mean, Tola just made an articulate case. He just did a bunch of tweaking to make sure those plans were the right plans. And so, if so,
Tweaking equaling thousands of person hours.
yeah, no, I'm not.
Right.
I'm saying
Huge
basically,
effort.
A way to sum up what you said is, we just did that. Now let's work harder to make sure we're meeting those goals. And I'm trying to clarify: is that what you all mean, or do you mean that we got to revisit what those targets and goals are? And
What I don't want to do is, I don't want to do the moratorium again, having just turned the.
Answers question. I said, what?
I thought I was.
Okay.
Why don't you?
Okay, I'm sorry.
When I wrote the words within to manage toward the existing plans, I was just trying to say the plans are okay. Let's see where we're moving toward them and where we're not moving toward them, and let's try and sync it up better. And that's what I was trying to say. And I guess because I thought you all were saying that, but then every time I get in front of everybody and the cameras and everything, it feels like we're questioning whether or not we believe in those plans.
Well, I'm not questioning whether I believe in the plans. Personally, I think my question is still, so if I imagine objective 2 as like achieve our growth target, that doesn't speak to why we're doing that. And so if this is a goal about our strategy and why we're focusing on this, it seems to me like it's more about livable community and how we can better manage development to achieve this goal of having community and strong sense of community and livability. It's not to achieve a target because we have, a number that's.
So those plans have eloquent words about why they say what they say, and I wasn't proposing. I was thinking we didn't need to bring those eloquent words all into the strategic plan. It was just, I thought it was saying work harder. Our strategic need is because there's a lot of fast growth and a lot of change. We need to work harder to make our plans reality. That's what I thought collectively you were saying.
Here's the crux of what I see the opportunity for Objective 2 is. I think we did this large effort of having the moratorium, and we made a bunch of changes, and we want to see how those changes go forward. But I have this lurking concern that at the back, the Central Issaquah Plan itself has growth, is based. I want to see if I'm struggling here because I don't want to crack open the Central Issaquah Plan because that was a huge body of work even before the moratorium. But I still, at some level, feel like the computer simulations that I saw in 2012 for the growth in the valley has a lot of density, and I keep hearing from some folks in the community that they look at. It comes back to a question you and I talked about yesterday. If somebody complains about a particular housing project, are they complaining because they don't want to see 6-story housing on the valley, or are they complaining because they're seeing chartreuse when they want to see mauve, right? And I don't know the answers to that, but we keep hearing these questions out there, and I feel like it's outside of what we did with the moratorium work, and I don't want to redo that, but I want to somehow answer these larger questions about how we respond to growth.
Mayor, did you want to say something?
I wondered if we could take a couple-minute break. So I actually don't think it's appropriate for me to address the group or join the conversation, but I did want to step outside with you for a couple of minutes if we could take a break and just go over some thoughts before, if that's okay.
have a public meeting thing going on here that I should know about?
No, you're ad hoc.
Ad hoc.
Everybody comfortable with that?
I don't mind. I do. There's a few things I want to say first.
Okay.
Tola. The objective 2 says new measures. And I think you're saying, wow, we just did that with the revamp for central area, right? Is that what?
We did this, right?
Right.
We did some lane correction.
And
some
so
metrics.
2 sounds like, the way it's phrased, like, let's do it again.
I'm hoping that we look at a broader set of questions
Okay.
with longer lead metrics.
Okay, what I'm trying to figure out is, you don't want to do it again. You want to do but you want to do something different. You don't want to
Bigger.
do that again.
I don't want to do the moratorium again.
Right. Okay. And I agree. I'm totally there with you. Yeah, that's not what I'm trying to say. But I can see how 2, the way it's written, can be from our chair. It's kind of like when it says new and deliberate measures. So we get it toward our goals. That does sound and feel a lot like why we did a moratorium. We did new and different things, so we got really, so we have a better chance of getting what we want specifically out of the central area. And
I'm pretty
so-
sure that if this said, keep doing what we're doing, we're on course, that I'd be getting a lot of grief for that.
Yeah, well, we kind of had that conversation. I think I more or less agreed with you. I mean, I think we have to be really fair with ourselves that we've done quite a bit recently. But anyway, Tola, am I saying what, at least that part of it? I know you want something bigger, but am I capturing that correctly? Your concern?
You're capturing my concern that I don't want to do the moratorium again.
Okay. And I can see how 2 may suggest something like that.
Yep.
Okay, all right, and I agree with you with that. But if your intent was like, and I know this is pretty unglamorous. All right, okay, now do that thing you said you were going to do. That's because you just went through a big exercise to design new measures to better manage toward our goals, because that's what we just did in the central area with the moratorium. So if all of this happened before the moratorium, we'd be able to point back and say, look at these changes we did to make sure we're managing better toward our goals. We just did that. Now that's just in the central area. So I have to put that caveat on because that was the extent of it. Except there was citywide affordable housing. I forgot about that. And if that can be clear to anybody, then I think we can discuss if that's the kind of, do we want an objective with that kind of scope? I think we want citywide objectives. And we're searching, and that's probably what Brian thought maybe he was saying as well. And Vicky's comment was, but that's not just managing toward numbers, citywide numbers, right? Okay. That just helps me kind of understand where we're struggling with this a little bit. If you want to.
Well, we're going to take a
10-minute
5-minute
timeout,
break,
knock yourself out.
reconvene at 4:05 by that clock.
What's that?
You figured it out.
They're pretty close.
So she was so happy.
We are pretty close.
Versus new,
Are we back
new
on-
things
are
that
we
we
on
haven't
camera?
considered that aren't in the plans that
Yep.
we also need to come up with to better manage growth.
Sorry.
You have,
More up a hill.
So-
Always have to go up a hill.
okay, now we're on?
Now we're on.
Okay, great. Councilmember Hunt, do you have a suggestion, or I hear you
Yeah.
processing maybe a couple options to throw out there?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I have a option. I think that a lot of what we're discussing is that we do have a lot of plans in place. They have a lot of visions. Those visions have a lot of eloquent language about community livability and all of the things why we want to plan for our future. So I think that is all true, and I think we also have heard from the community that one of our objectives should be to implement those plans, and some of the language under Objective 2 is currently about implementing those plans. So either if we know how to get there, then implement that part of the plan, and if we don't know, then find regulations to implement what's in the plan. And then I think where it bifurcates is that there's also this new actions piece, which is, as we are implementing the plans, what are we learning about how do we balance amenities if things are out of balance, or if our jobs housing ratio is out of balance, things that are regulations to manage growth that aren't specifically to address something that is in the plan, but is rather to address the process of implementing the plan and those interim steps. So I think there's the new, and then there's the plan implementation, and then
So we should implement our plans, and we should monitor progress and make adjustments if progress isn't going in the direction of the plans.
Well, and I don't think that I guess, so one of my issues is that I don't think it's all about, trying to achieve a linear course towards meeting a target, because a lot of these, I think a lot of things like public amenities or jobs, you could reach the target at 20 years, but you could reach it in such a way that in between those 20 years, you had a big imbalance that led to the community being unsatisfied with the quality of life or the availability of jobs. So I don't think that it's really just about achieving the target. At least something is about the process by which we achieve that target. And
Pretty sure I didn't say target just a second ago,
Okay.
because I figured out that that's triggering.
Well, it has a very specific meaning.
Let's
Say it that way.
I heard you say.
Or so about the vision, even, right? We could achieve the vision, but in between now and achieving the vision, there's a lot of different possibilities of how the city could look in the interim, and those also need to be made.
So I heard you say we should implement our plans. And then there's this other piece of this that is, as we go forward, if all is not well, we should make adjustments. But I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do we say all is not well, and based on what? So it's something so our successors 5 years from now or 10 years from now know what our intent was. That's what I'm trying to get to, because I hear you saying, as we go forward, people might not do exactly what we were thinking today, and we might need to tweak. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do we say that so that we're clear and our successors understand us, even if our successors are us. If I'm trying to remember, 5 years from now what we meant today. And I'm still a little fuzzy on that.
Well, and I will say too, I noticed that the old Objective 3, which was about variety of public amenities, housing types, and services, is now no longer an objective. But I think that is a lot of that sort of moment in time, at each snapshot in time, what are the public amenities, the housing types, the services that are available, sort of managing that as we proceed towards a vision. That's where I'm going, and I think that I'm not sure what happens with that objective, if it moved or if it just sort of got...
We were trying to restate the objectives to meet what we thought we were hearing, and you're right, it isn't restated, because we thought it was a little mushy, and we were trying to be more specific, so maybe clearly that didn't work. So we should have, I'm hearing one objective about implementing existing plans. And then there's maybe another one that says, we should monitor, we're already proposing one that says we should monitor how we've done so far. We should keep monitoring, and maybe it isn't just about Central Issaquah, but it's about all plans. And we should be achieving a balance of jobs and housing, infrastructure, amenities, some language that's saying that, so we're both implementing our plans and we're monitoring our progress to try and make sure we're achieving that balance.
Yeah, monitoring and maybe something like course correction, some sort of
Monitoring, course
action-oriented
correction.
part of that. Yeah.
We have plans in place, we should implement them, and we should monitor progress, making adjustments or course corrections to ensure we have balance and livability. Or is that getting to what you're?
That's how I thought it was bifurcating, but I'm interested to hear how other people think it's bifurcating.
So Lynn, Paul, how does that feel?
I'm reading something. I think you have summarized in your statements what I feel one of our objectives is. The way you've used different words sometimes, and I've felt that all along. So I do agree.
Thank you.
with that.
Did that include what I said about a minute and a half ago?
Well, I think you don't measure for the sake of measuring. You're measuring because there is some objective that you're trying to see where you are relative to that, with the assumed intent that if you're offline, you'll do something about it. So yeah, you make a course. Yeah, so yes, it does.
I get a sense that your existing plans made that. I'm sure there are a ton of people in Issaquah that moved here because they like it is right now, and they just as soon it didn't change.
Yep.
Or like it was 10 years ago, and they just as soon it didn't change from them. And nevertheless, there's all this growth, and there's a regional plan, and Issaquah is required to take its share, and there's a lot of people who just, we wish it wasn't like that, but nevertheless, we know that we have to do this, and so we're making the best plans we can in the context of it's a free country and people can move here, we can't stop them, and we're making it to balance jobs and housing and livability and services and amenities. We're trying to balance those things, so those plans are our best shot at trying to accommodate what's happening. And so I guess that was my thinking, is you're monitoring progress on those thoughtful plans, and if progress isn't what you'd hope, then you're going to have to make some course corrections.
I agree with that, and I want to add that if we were having this conversation 3 years ago, we would have been kind of foreshadowing what turned into our moratorium, and we'd be looking at right now. I said we did exactly what we said we should. And I don't think because we're in a strategic planning process now means that, okay, well, we have to come up with something big like we just did. And so I hope we're not forcing. So as unexciting as that objective you just articulated, which might be very unexciting and unappealing to people, I would make that argument. We just did something really big, and it is. And I feel as an elected representative, it's very important that we make sure that we achieve that vision, and that those course corrections that we made are effective, and we continue to monitor and be responsive and reaction and get ahead so we get the outcomes that we want. That is, to me, and that might not be great strategic plan material, but boy, it's pretty damn important.
Put that on my business card. Unexciting plans.
I just said maybe there's that dynamic, and you said it yourself. You've said it yourself, like, it's pretty unexciting.
I was just trying to get a laugh, and it worked.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing 4 objectives at the moment. One that's about preserving neighborhoods. One that's about communicating better. one that's about implementing existing plans, and one that's about monitoring progress and taking course corrections if we are not achieving the balance that we hoped.
I think those last two are the same, are elements of the same objective. Because it's not, in implementing, you're measuring your implementation. They're two sides of the same coin, in my mind.
I could probably argue either way on that.
Okay, but they're just not discrete
that-
enough. They're just.
That feel right? Those four that I listed, and you could either bundle those two or not.
Sorry, can you say again what the difference is between the new 3 and the new 4, which is the old 3?
You left
Okay,
out
'cause-
infrastructure.
So I'm hearing preserve neighborhoods is not controversial, and that's number
Right.
one.
Number one.
And I think the one that is 4 on the sheet is about communication.
No.
Wasn't there one?
No, objective 3 here is really about getting ahead of growth, right? Infrastructure is planned and prepared for future growth, leveraging development, incorporating initiatives, sustainable and resilient design. So that's just about being proactive
It's
on our
infrastructure.
growth.
Yeah.
Especially infrastructure.
All right.
Okay.
So there
Well,
isn't
if-
one about communication. There's only 3 then.
There's an action about communication.
Action, yeah.
Oh, there's one about infrastructure. That's what I'm
Yeah,
so
that's
the
the one that
fourth
came
one
over.
that's on there is about infrastructure. And there were 3, and we're kind of splitting the second one into 2. So as shown on the sheet you've got here, this is about preserving neighborhoods, and I haven't heard any controversy about that. And this one is about infrastructure keeping pace with growth, and we really haven't talked about that at all. So let's not assume it's all a done deal, but that's not the current topic. The current, that we've been diving in on this one that's currently numbered 2, and I guess I'm putting out that there are 2 parts to that, which are either 2 parts of one objective or 2 objectives. One is implement the plans that we have, and the other part is monitor progress and take course corrections if as needed. That's what I heard Becky propose.
Get forward on, but not in front of our skis.
Yeah, that's actually, like I was thinking too, it's also about course correction, but it's about thinking ahead about what possible course corrections you could do and being more kind of forward thinking about those sorts of things. So instead of just coming to a moment in time where we're like, we need a moratorium, would there be other stops along the way where you could do a different sort of course correction?
Right, and structurally for a strategic plan, I'll propose it one more time. I think those are really the same objective. And they can be captured they can be captured in the actions. They're different actions, but they're really about achieving the vision that we have for the areas that are for the city and specifically where we have plans.
Work to implement our existing plans, monitoring progress, and thinking ahead and taking course corrections as necessary.
Yes. See, that to me, that's the objective.
Everybody was nodding.
That's a lot of hands.
That's just part of the paper.
Good thing we're not stopping in 9 minutes. Am I the guy who said I thought we could get this whole thing done in an hour? Oops.
So implement our existing plans, monitor progress, think ahead, and take corrective action as needed.
Implement plans is separate from the, right? Didn't we say we bifurcated it?
Well,
So-
Paul's
Kinda
been
like
lobbying
this
that it's
together.
part of the same, it's all the same objective. And I perceived that you both bought that when he said it, but maybe that's not true.
It doesn't matter. What matters is that we have the idea, whether it's bifurcated or not. It's not a hill I want to fight over.
I hear
What
that.
matters is that it gets folded into action items that have human beings assigned to them and budget assigned to them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it's critical. I think one nice thing about having it be one objective is then we can either have achieved the whole objective or there can be a problem with part of the objective, and they're definitely related. So it's.
I think everybody's okay at now.
It's okay. It's okay put together. Yeah.
Let's. So I hear.
I will say it reads a lot like actions, and you know, one of our actions.
All the rest of these
previously
are
was-
written as outcome statements, and we probably need to get that into the same tense. But
Yeah, I would think it's something like, you know, the community sponsored visions are honored in some sort of way. I mean, it would be more like what the objective is versus implement plans, which is currently echoed, I think, almost directly in one of our actions. So.
okay. And would it be all right if we tried to write it into outcome statement language in a room by ourselves and come back and see if we got it okay? As long as we have the intent, all right?
You guys have shown aptitude at that in the past.
So I'm not hearing any pushback on the first one. I have a sort of a question about two directions where I feel like this could go right now. One would be we could turn and see, are we okay about the infrastructure piece, which hasn't been mentioned, or we could spend some time talking about these actions. And we have 30 minutes left.
I have a question about number 2, so I don't want to move on to number 3 without
Okay.
first being able to address this.
Put it out there.
Last time when we met, Stacy specifically mentioned how she wanted to see kind of what had been collected through this process, and I believe you guys provided that information.
Right.
What has come of that? Did you get any? I believe you spoke with her. Did anything come out of that we should be discussing?
Based on the conversation that David and I had with her yesterday, I feel like we have channeled the thrust of those comments, and there's not something else out there that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Then another.
I can just add to that. So I don't think we fully know if there were specific comments that you drew out of all that data and is proposing. So I don't think I can
Okay.
confidently say that.
I mean, she got the information. It appeared to me that she had reviewed it at some level.
Okay.
And,
All right.
and she had a lot to say.
Okay, I just didn't want to miss that in case. So thanks.
She
for
did not
reporting.
say, so-and-so said this, and therefore.
Okay.
She didn't say anything like that.
And then one other thing that in the last meeting, Stacy actually mentioned it, like, hey, let's, I'm wondering if we really have the proper protection in place for hillsides. We should take a look at slopes. And has that, I wasn't really sure how to react to that until I realized, we actually do have we do have, you're looking at, or we have,
Right, I'm pointing to that it's in there.
where is it? I have it.
Sub item 4.
Okay, all right.
2.8C.4.
Okay, so there, thank you. So, knowing that you're gonna come back with the perfect rewording of that.
We're rewording the part that's in the blue box up
Yes,
here.
yeah, it's in that blue box on the wall now too.
And-
So I'm good to move on. I don't have any other questions about number
And we
2.
would propose that the actions that are under here are the draft of the actions. Address that.
establishing targets ones, those are sort of measuring things. If they could be more action, to achieve interim targets. And
So establish and pursue, or establish
Yeah.
and achieve
yeah,
interim targets.
something that's an action instead of just
Yep.
setting another.
May I ask, are there any other questions about any of the actions? Is it your feeling that those actions still fit under that revised objective 2?
I thought you specifically didn't want us going to this level. I thought that was the whole thing from the administration.
I don't think we're asking for wordsmithing or refinement. I was wanting to see if there's any input or questions about them.
I do have a question, and I want to get closure on what I was talking about maybe an hour ago, because it was a new thought to me, and I don't know if it really got purchased with anybody in the room. But I just want to get closure on that, and that was that whole upcoming planning and the new numbers we're going to get. And yeah, I got hung up on the word target, but that was an interesting path for me to go down, because I'm sitting here realizing, boy, I think that would be a great objective of our work on growth management, would to be get ahead of the next GMA planning round that's coming, and knowing that we have to work within our community of neighbors. Let's go to that negotiation with a justified set of objectives that we want to get out of our targets, knowing that they reflect the desires of the community.
I support that. And I think that it did make its way up to the whiteboard, but it's not in there now.
Do you have clarity on what the aspirations of the community are so that you could do that?
No.
So I guess that's my question, is I hear you say, we want to go out and lobby for our destiny on the regional stage. I get that. But I think at the moment you don't know what your objective is.
I'm glad this is a 5-year plan. I think that's complex. You have to work on that.
Part of this is enhancing communication, which is up there already, but we do need, I do think we need to have better communication with the community about their perception of.
So to get to the whether we can know enough to, I'm confident if we create some sort of action item that talks about doing some homework ahead of the next round of countywide, or is it PSRC? Which is it? PSRC?
Well, it's we get them from the county. They come from the state.
Yeah.
That's
State
right.
assigns
That's
to the
right.
counties,
The
counties
county
give to the
sides.
cities.
Okay. So I'm confident that we can come up with something that would be valuable, because the punchline is the community doesn't want any of this growth, right? But we have to have it, and here's why. And I'm gonna monologue for 2 minutes on this subject. So the community doesn't want any of it, right? They would love to not build anything more in this community. But here's what would happen. The Growth Management Act would break if Redmond, Kirkland, Bellevue, Issaquah, if everybody did that. Within 2 years, the Growth Management Act would be rescinded. You would have McMansions filling up Falls City and Preston, and then they would fill up all the communities that would get built west of North Bend all the way up to the pass. And so what we are doing, and this is, and I said this, and you missed this because it was we were talking about the elevator speech at the beginning, right? We are the second most managed growth metro in the U.S. behind Portland. And the reason is so that we can have Squaw Mountain, right? If Larry Phillips and the GMA crowd hadn't come along, Cougar Mountain would be covered in single-family homes and McMansions, and the backside of the plateau would be covered in McMansions, and all of Cougar Mountain, did I already say Cougar? Cougar, Squawk, and Tiger, thank you, would be covered in McMansions, and they're not because of the growth that that we all feel pain when discussing with the community, right? So that's the context for some sort of action item around this, right? It is a painful thing that has to be done. But we can make it less painful when we go back to the public and say, we understand the sacrifices that have already been made in the growth in this community, and it informed our conversations with the county. But gosh darn it, if we just get some percentage that every other community that wasn't as progressive as ours in this next round, it's going to be so hard to say to the community. And I will tell you that there is concern out there at the county level that GMA is going to break under the onslaught of all this growth, and maybe things are slowing down now, and maybe some of that concern is decreasing. But that's the context of this sort of an action item. So when we say what's fair and what will the community support, this is in some senses a bitter pill, but we can make it a less bitter pill by doing our homework, and that's what I look for out of some sort of action item around this, and why it's important.
So
And the pill is
This is the growth that everybody has to take, because otherwise it's not, you don't get mountains like we have, right? That's what GMA gave us for the last 20 years and will continue to give us if it doesn't break.
So I hear you'd like to see an action about getting ahead of the regional conversation. And is that enough for staff?
I'd like to respond, and I think it reinforces this is really important. Definitely reinforces that.
Yep.
I think there are elements in this already which are, I think, about bringing the community along, which I think you touched upon as well as essential as part of that. And I think you said it's the tension between wanting both, but having to accept a compromise, certainly on the growth and density side. I mean, that's what we're trying to address for our community. I totally agree with that.
Okay, we're going to add an action item about getting ahead of the regional conversation. The other objective that we haven't talked about at all, because it was in a different priority area last week, is infrastructure is planned and prepared for future growth, leveraging development and incorporating innovative, sustainable, and resilient design. This was in the other goal, and that group said, that's really about maintaining the infrastructure we got and keeping up with that. This is about accommodating new growth and keeping up with it, so it belongs here.
And this is also where growth pays for growth, right?
Yeah, if you want to say that, this would be the place to say that.
Well, that's the aspiration, right? That's what our community tells us loud and clear. And the extent to which we can turn knobs and crank levers to make that happen as much as we can. The conversation was that it should occur here rather than in that other.
Do you want this objective to say growth pays for growth? Do you want this objective to have that language in there? I'm just trying to clarify what you're saying.
What? No?
No, I was chuckling at a different thought. Go ahead.
Should growth pay for growth?
I just think that phrase is kind of funny. I mean, we do that in forms of impact fees primarily, and so.
Does that work?
It's just like the whole thing we just got done with. It's not a very well understood thing. I tell people that the last time, especially when we did transportation impact, simplified concurrency, and a lot of the impact fees that we do charge, we're at the legal upper limit of what we can charge. So, agreed. When someone said growth should pay for growth, I absolutely agree. We're doing the best we can, and in many cases, the legal most we can. So, anyway, and I think those are just. I mean, we refine those. We're going to take another look at concurrency. I think maybe adjust those impact fees. But that is something that we're working on and always have been. And so I don't know. Are you suggesting objective 3 should be growth plan pays for growth, or is there an action underneath there?
I think you have to try to figure out how to match the dollars for growth with the growth that you allow in the community. I mean, this is about the $475 million capital plan, right? If growth had paid for growth, by now we wouldn't have $475 million worth of capital that we need.
Yeah, and the laws don't allow impact fees from growth to pay for fixing existing deficiencies.
I know.
I know.
Yep.
And
And
so-
yet,
But
here we
that-
are.
Yeah, well, and there's,
Right. This town didn't have $475 million worth of capital needs 20 years ago.
right, so we can discuss why we're there. But, so is there an action, are you suggesting an action?
Infrastructure,
Or different
I
naming?
like this. That's why we're talking about it.
So, well, is the objective as infrastructure is planned and prepared for future growth, leveraging development and incorporating innovative, sustainable, and resilient design? Does that do it for you?
Well, so I do have one, and I've been in other conversations where this is a huge issue. Concurrency says, that infrastructure is supposed to be at the time, built at concurrent with, when the growth comes online, or within 6 years. And like
It's
that.
10 now, isn't it?
Is it 10?
It's 10 now.
Okay, it's even longer.
I know.
And everybody like chokes with that, and I totally and I know why it exists, and I know why people choke with that. When I read this objective, and I look at the word prepared, I think we're saying prepared generally means you've got something before you need it, and if the intent of this is to say, all right, we don't need it yet, but it's coming, so let's build it ahead of time. Is that what this is saying?
We actually can't do that in many situations, right?
Well, is that what this is saying?
That's not how I read planned and prepared.
Okay, well, prepared, that's how I read prepared. If that's not the intent, that's what I think prepared says.
Prepared means you have the mechanisms in place, you have the capacity for the growth.
And I think another way to say it too is we're trying to make the 10-year window smaller. That we're not gonna, if possible, we don't wanna go all the way to the 10 years to use the funding. We wanna try and get things in place. We wanna be prepared to get them in place earlier if possible.
Prepared
And
to
that's
get
not
them-
always, we're not always able to, but I think that we're trying to figure out are there mechanisms that allow us to be more prepared so that when the growth, so that our funding is ready, the project is ready, and it comes before 10 years.
Can I ask, so John Mortensen was a part of that group that had worked
Yes,
on this.
so
you could probably-
this one came from the infrastructure group.
Yeah.
And so we originally put this together with Central Issaquah in mind, and it's been made a little bit more vague. But the whole point is, inside of Central Issaquah, we're basically rebuilding a city within the existing city. And so we need to get ready for the infrastructure. And so that's not necessarily that we would build everything and then the developers would come in. It's more of, we'd figure out what needs to be done. Right now we've got a whole bunch of plans that talk about, there's the water plan, the parks plan, the green necklace plan, there'll be the master mobility plan. I could go on forever naming plans. But basically, look at everything that we've got and figure out what needs to be done between now and when Central Issaquah is fully built out, and get prepared so we'd know, okay, when a development comes in here, they're going to need sewer, and we know according to our sewer plan that the line needs to be upsized, but their frontage is here, but the whole line needs to be upgraded. How do we go about getting that done? It's just basically looking at the end of go ahead.
Oh, so I'm going to extrapolate from what you're saying there. Are you saying there are elements in the Gilman Corridor Plan where there's motivation to exactly what you're talking about? Are you saying that that should just be blanket the whole central area and have all of that, not just for Gilman, but for every other street and corridor that we have? Are we going too far with that? So it sounded like you were saying to me.
In my mind, the final product would be a report about this thick that would have maps that would show what needs to be done.
I'll also add too, we think there are unique opportunities to think about block level combined kind of infrastructure. So instead of thinking about it parcel by parcel, we're thinking about it at a corridor level or a block level, so that not every developer needs to build little stormwater system eating up a chunk of land, but yeah.
Okay. So I'm kind of right about that Gilman corridor analogy, but you're
Yeah, I
kind of
think
at
so.
the block level, but it is just that. So you're going to come in and punch a hole in the ground. Guess what? We know comprehensively along this block, this is really what we need to have. So it's just like having the conceptual design that we have in Newport Way, right? Someone comes in, does some frontage improvements, it's going to fit within that framework.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like a conceptual framework for central area.
Correct.
Yes.
Conceptual infrastructure is what I meant to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conceptual infrastructure for the central area.
Yes.
Is that, okay, it's cool, by the way. Is that your same understanding?
No, but that's fine also.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, good. So you answered my question, I think you both did, about what the word prepared means. And I take it what you said. And is that a fair analogy? I'm using the conceptual plan specifically because that is what we achieved on Newport Way, with a lot of community input, and it's not designed in a lot of detail, but enough to know.
Enough to know.
Yes.
And it's that, like John talked about, that synthesis across all the various plans, saying, okay, let's look at what that means when we pull it all together.
Okay.
So do we need to change the language of the objective?
We should take. We want to be prepared, but it sounds like the infrastructure is prepared, and that's the way that reads to me.
Okay.
And I don't think we mean the infrastructure is prepared or / built. Right?
Yeah,
We don't mean
right.
that.
We're not, it's a
Right.
stage before that.
Right.
Yes.
Because I thought maybe what and then what Trish said a moment ago, I think she said something like, we want the infrastructure impacts to growth to be implemented concurrent with growth.
So
that's what I think.
So you want to say
Which is-
infrastructure is planned so that Issaquah is prepared for future growth.
That's true. I have a sense that there's probably even a better way to say it based upon my understanding of what John just said. I think, and you said specifically the central area.
Yes, and so this has been made vague, and I think you guys can decide on how specifically we want to be, because on one hand, we're trying to make it vague where the future growth is coming, but in reality, the future growth is coming in central Issaquah. So trying to balance we don't want to make it feel like we're ignoring the other neighborhoods, but acknowledging the reality of this part of the city is going to be very different in the future than it is now, whereas the other neighborhoods won't change as much.
So infrastructure is planned and implemented to prepare for
We use the word
future
implement.
growth. Don't say implemented.
I think that's going the
It's just-
opposite direction of
What if it's just planned?
Well, see, I think it's beyond planned.
Yeah.
Infrastructure is planned to prepare for future growth. You're saying it is more than that.
I
So-
think it's beyond planned.
So what is
Because
it?
plan does have certain meaning, and I think what we're delivering, again, I'll use the Gilman corridor thing, that's beyond what I would call a transportation plan, right? It's where there are right-of-ways needed, what the lot lines really, really are. All of those blurry lines are sharp and clear now, and I just would find a way to describe that.
That's
It's not using the word
plan.
planned.
That's not planned.
Well,
It's-
just the word plan. The plan's got a loaded word. We use it in a lot of different ways, but I
infrastructure
mean,
is designed.
you guys are. The word's not going to fall out of my mouth. So if
Is
anybody
it,
has an idea,
is it,
I'd
so is
love
it
to hear it.
infrastructure is designed to prepare for future growth?
No.
I think that takes it
Not
too
quite there.
far. 'Cause you're looking at
That's
10,
okay.
30
That's
Plan
good.
is-
We
plan
know what
isn't enough,
we know what
design
too
is
far
too
is. We
much,
know what not
so-
enough is. It's between planned and designed.
I've got
there you go.
advanced degrees in both of those topics. I don't know what's in between.
It's more than planned, less than designed.
Conceive.
Well, so the other
we
part.
call it, yeah, pre-concept.
So the other thing that is not included in that statement, though, is leveraging development, which was the part that spoke to me about the growth pays for growth.
Well, I was just not reading
That
the
could
rest of
be-
the statement.
okay.
It seems to me infrastructure is to prepare for future growth, leveraging development and incorporating innovative, sustainable, and resilient design. But we're struggling. Plan doesn't seem to be enough. Design seems to be too far. Conceived, detailed, planned. I mean,
Staff, be bold. Somebody be daring.
Programmed. Pulling up.
Okay, so I want to do a time check. We have 13 minutes left. My point in asking to have this brought over to this was that there's two big infrastructure chunks, right? All the stuff that we don't have done that we should have, that we need to do, and then there's making sure that all the stuff that's coming got accounted for. And so, if we have other stuff we can spend the next 12 minutes talking about this, or we can let you guys go off and work your voodoo and try to synthesize some words that will reflect what you've heard today, and then maybe use the last 12 minutes for or we can just spend it talking about what exists between planned and designed.
well, I think
Time is getting short.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for a time check. I think we are, at the end of our agenda. So my sense is, if you are comfortable with this objective and letting staff and the consultants fiddle with the wording.
But we tried to take a stab at metrics in other groups, right? At the end of this process, we haven't had that conversation yet today.
Fair point. Fair point. Paul and Vicki, would you be comfortable with giving the staff and the consultants a shot at figuring out what the right action word is in this, and spending the rest of the time we have today talking about performance metrics?
So I'm happy with this being here. I was in the core infrastructure group, and I think it fits really well into this section. So I think it's a good place for it. I'm basically happy with the wording, so I'm happy for you to wordsmith. I did have a question though about the actions.
Ask it.
Okay, so one of them is D, which is about the light rail planning, which I know there was a lot of discussion in mobility, and which seems like it. I just wondered how that got into growth and development, and now it's also into infrastructure, leveraging development. And now we have light rail planning.
Is this the 10,000 stall parking ramp?
What? This is a new one. So
North Bend and Snoqualmie one?
So it may very well belong better in mobility, and I think it was in response to some things that we had heard through some conversations, and maybe this isn't the right place for it, but it is. The thinking is that there is a piece related to future infrastructure planning that has some relationship to growth, but also has connections potentially to light rail planning.
We think the bulk of it is about that. It's the area planning that needs to happen, and so that's why we think it's under growth and development. How is that area around where the station might be going to grow and develop? What do we need to think about with regard to that?
And I will say, I think as you look at all the different goal area objectives kind of together, you'll see that there are a number of connections across the board. And I think that's a totally valid question of, as you kind of think about these, does it better fit within one or another, or do we need to somehow make those connections more explicit in how they're articulated? Because there are clear connections.
I would just say the focus here wasn't so much about light rail as a mode of transportation, and it wasn't about just solely or focused on the infrastructure, but it was around bigger planning piece.
Like Tola said earlier this evening, what's important is that that's captured somewhere in the strategic plan. Right? And this element of light rail planning, I certainly feel agreed with everybody that it should be in the strategic plan. So this is where it's captured. I'm fine with it.
And then I just throughout the strategic plan, where it's possible to have things that are not, make a plan or plan to do. It's like layers of
Do it.
plans. I would like, so for things like review the impact fees. Okay, we're not just going to look at the impact fees. We're going to
Good catch.
potentially
That's a
make changes.
Great edit.
Just because we're in a plan, and then there's lots of planning within the plan, and so when we don't have to be planning within the plan, I would like to just do
Action. Good. Action in the actions.
Sounds great.
All right, that's good feedback.
So the action, which is infrastructure master plan, so that's a new one on me. And I think, John, that's what you're saying, right? And so let's build one of these so that we can kind of get ahead of development and proactively proactively plan our infrastructure for development.
It's a plan.
Right. Okay. And then I'm still going to pop up the objective level. It reads kind of odd to me. Past the word prepared, that comma's in there. Prepared for future growth, leveraging development and incorporating innovative, sustainable, and resilient design. Leveraging development. Is that just the way of saying down below we're going to talk about impact fees?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
the
I think-
growth paid for growth part.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
Okay, that's just a new way. Okay. Ensuring that growth pays for growth and incorporating
As much as
sustainable,
asterisk as much as possible to your earlier point.
Okay, so that's the growth pays for growth phrase, leveraging development. Okay, it's a little bit ambiguous, but we'll send along an interpretation key.
All right, I feel basically comfort with this, and we will go back and try and tighten up the language according to how we understand your directions here. Let's spend our last 5 minutes talking about performance measures. To measure performance on the strategic plan for growth and development, staff has proposed 3 performance measures about balancing growth, community livability, and infrastructure investment, percentage and ratio of jobs and housing relative to growth targets, neighborhood access to public amenities, and growth-related infrastructure funded or built versus total identified, percent publicly and privately funded. How do you feel about those?
How do you neighborhood access to public amenities? So my neighborhood's never going to have a grocery store. Old Town needs a grocery store. How do we? It's not clear to me how that one works. Community livability, I would have assumed we would look at something like the National Citizen Survey.
Yeah, that was my thought too, just because I think neighborhood access to public amenities, we do have very different neighborhoods within Issaquah that have, very different, I think, baselines about what kind of amenities, when you move there, about what, your public transportation access is going to be, for example. And so, yeah, if you live up on Squawk Mountain, you have a lot less options to get to a bus stop.
So I agree with Tool's question. So what's the measure? What's the measure?
I think this reads like a distance, right? Like you're.
Well, I'm asking staff.
Right, it could be something like the AARP the score, livability score, or the walkability. How many things are you able to get to, within a quarter mile, or a park, a community center. It might be something that we go out to the neighborhoods, and maybe neighborhoods, like you said, Old Town does need a grocery store. Squawk, there's no zoning for a grocery store, so they're probably not going to get one. So it could be more individual.
Nor would we want outsiders coming up to the top of Squawk if one was built.
So this sounds like a project to somehow measure community livability.
Right.
Okay. It's not an existing measure, but maybe it could. You mentioned the
Right.
80 or.
So you think you could use an existing score for this livability score?
Right, there's several out there that
We can look at some of these as maybe one component out of many in trying to determine livability. So none of these metrics are perfect. None of these measure exactly what we want them to measure. But for example, the walk score is just about proximity. It's not about quality of the amenities that you're within proximity to.
So are you proposing that as we approach completion of this plan, staff will propose a composite measure using some of these different things to score Issaquah's neighborhoods collectively to give council something they can see about whether it's getting better or worse?
I'll tell you, as a council member, I would like to see the National Citizen Survey data in regards to, these topics broken out by neighborhood, and then you triage the hotspots. Okay, sorry, multiple conversations. National Citizen Survey by neighborhood, and then you triage the hotspots, right? You do the exception handling. You figure out if there's areas that are outliers negatively. Figure out why they're unhappy.
Yep.
We
I
did
mean,
that
why
last
they-
time. We did, geographic crosstab, and we can do that, and we can pull out. It's all going to be about kind of indicators, right? So we can pick 5 things that we think symbolize livability assessment.
Yeah. I think that, so previously there was a kind of survey-related metric,
neighborhood?
on this one, and so we can go back to that and kind of think about it on a neighborhood basis.
Where I live, it's bobcats and bears and raccoons,
I
right?
think the feedback staff's getting here is that they'd rather see a score related to survey than score. Is that,
I'm hearing go back to survey.
I am hearing
Yeah,
go back to
exactly.
survey,
That's-
and I think
that's
that's
what I just said.
quite frankly manageable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree? Paul? Vicky?
Well, as stated, it's not a measure. We have other measures that we're already familiar with. I was just checking with David. I think this crosses over with that other area about, what's the title?
Social and economic
I
vitality.
mean,
Yes.
there are measures of, I mean, and I know at the other planning body I sit on, and as I mentioned last night in this room, it's, equity and health factors are big parts of how successful you're managing growth, which includes access to opportunity, access to parks, access to public transit. So and those are being accepted broader, I think, in the broader area, community, Puget Sound area, as measures of good growth.
So
And I
I-
think that's generally what you're trying to get at number 2.
So I'm basically okay with number 2, whether it's a survey or not. But my one thing would be, if I'm trying to use this as a council member to understand how people are, how we are performing in meeting these objectives for growth and development, it would be nice to know, have more of a growth, because I think more of a framing around growth and development, because I think you could have people that say, like, yeah, it's great living here, but we really hate how the city is managing the traffic, but they still, still like living here. So I think maybe somehow getting more of a sense of how the community is feeling with the prospect of the future growth. That's what we're really trying to
So a
manage.
metric about how the community feels about how growth is happening.
Yeah, I think it can be based on survey. I just would like it to have more of to make sure that it is reflecting how we are meeting our objectives as they relate to growth and development. And I'm not sure that it directly, if we just look at community survey responses about how livable is it in the community, I'm not sure that that's going to be an answer that ties back directly into growth and development. So if there's a survey question that's related to growth and development, or that we can bridge that, that's what I would be most
There
interested in.
is an existing question that relates to community perceptions, I believe, on growth and development, or something to that effect.
Something
but
we can
Yeah.
do something.
So I hear direction that we want to go back to a survey on this one and a variety of opinions about whether it's about growth and development or about character of livability or
It could be
both
both.
of those.
I just want
So that's good feedback for next draft. All right, this has been a very active 2 hours. Thank you all for sticking at it, and I think we made actually some solid progress today. So thank you. The immediate next step is we will assemble this from all the work groups and put a package together to get to you for the council packet that goes out
At the end of the week.
at the end of the week.
So,
I think this will- and
48 hours.
Review the whole thing next week at council.
Brian, thank you once again for facilitating these meetings.
Thank you all.
And city staff for